Thank you, Lori. Take it away and give the introduction.
All right. Well, welcome everybody. It's a wonderful turnout. So our presenter tonight is Susan Bateson, who likes to be called Susan. Um, she's a retired human resources executive with 36 years of experience in biotechnology, banking, and legal industries. Previous employers include Human Genome Sciences, 16 years there, and JP Morgan for 11 years. Susan reports that she truly enjoyed serving as the senior HR executive through most of her career and feels that she had the opportunity to channel Frances Perkins's commitment to improving the lives of the employees for whom she was responsible. Susan also has nonprofit governing experience in various sectors and has served in leadership roles as board chair, officer, and committee chair. And the boards that she's been on include Mount Holyoke College, we've all heard of it, from 2005 to 2015, the Monhegan Museum of Art and History since 2015, the Frances Perkins Center in Newcastle, Maine since 2016, and the Kennebec Estuary Land Trust in Bath, Maine. And her board committees served include Development, Finance, and Audit, as well as the Faculty Trustee Conference Committee at Mount Holyoke. She was an economics major at Mount Holyoke and spent her junior year studying abroad at the University of Edinburgh, Scotland. And she also earned an MBA from NYU. Susan grew up in Connecticut, lived and worked in New York City and the Washington, D.C. region, with brief stints in Paris, France, and London. She retired in 2012, and she and her husband, Stephen Fuller, PhD, a university professor emeritus from George Mason University, moved to Maine full-time in 2019 to live where they both most love to sail, hike, and kayak. Susan and Steve love to travel and have done so quite widely, from Antarctica to the Arctic region and Africa to New Zealand and Tasmania. Susan has 2 stepdaughters through Steve and 4 grandchildren. Susan tells us that she is not going to be able to join us at our 50th reunion, unfortunately, because she has the chance to travel to the Greek island of Paris and is taking a group of friends and colleagues. So we will miss you. So Susan has asked that you hold your questions until the end of her presentation. And if you have questions as we're going along, you can put them in the chat, or after the presentation, you can just raise your hand. So with that, I will pass the presentation over to Susan. Thank you.
Thank you, Lori, for your kind introduction. I'm so delighted to be here tonight, and thank you for inviting me to speak about one of my interests and volunteer commitments. As Lori mentioned, I've been a board member of the nonprofit, nonpartisan Frances Perkins Center since 2016, and tonight I'll be talking about fellow Mount Holyoke alum Frances Perkins, as well as the work of the Frances Perkins Center and the significance of the Frances Perkins National Monument. I'll be happy to answer any questions at the end. But first, while I can't see everybody's faces because I've got the screen share going on, how many of you had not heard of Frances Perkins before you arrived at Mount Holyoke? Raise your hand. We always find it amazing that, and it happens all the time at the center, at the homestead, that people say, why did I never hear of her? And so we are about filling that gap. Next slide, please. The Frances Perkins National Monument in Newcastle, Maine, is the only place fully dedicated to telling the story of Frances Perkins, a remarkable national icon about whom it has been said, quote, few Americans have had deeper influence in shaping labor and social policy in the United States. End quote. Monument status brought the National Perkins Homestead National Historic Landmark into the National Park System. It is the 433rd unit of the National Park Service and only the 13th such site honoring a woman or women. This slide depicts the monument with its brick house and connected barn. The work of the Frances Perkins Center continues as we now are the designated philanthropic and interpretive partner of the site and of Frances Perkins' legacy. Next slide, please. The Frances Perkins Center celebrates the life and legacy of the first woman to serve in a presidential cabinet at the place that shaped her character. Perkins was a social reformer, a government official, Secretary of Labor for 12 years under FDR, the driving force behind groundbreaking New Deal programs that are still the foundation of the U.S. social safety net, including Social Security, unemployment insurance, the 40-hour work week, child labor laws, and the minimum wage. Next slide, please. A few quick facts. Fannie Coralie Perkins was born in a boarding house in Boston in 1880 to a family who had lived in Maine since the mid-18th century. The two photographs of the property on this slide are the brick house where her grandmother, it was built for her grandmother when she married, and that's the connected facility that is the barn. You'll find a lot in New England that barns are connected to the house, so you didn't have to go outside to take care of the animals during the winter time. Next slide, please. She grew up in Worcester, Mass, and went to public high school. Perkins spent summers as a child at her grandmother's homestead in Newcastle, Maine, which was built in 1837. It was her grandmother, Cynthia Otis Perkins, who told young Fannie, quote, "If somebody opens a door for you, walk right in and do the best you can," end quote. Next slide, please. As we all know, Perkins attended Mount Holyoke College. Fannie, or Perk, as she was known to her classmates, majored in physics with minors in chemistry and biology. She was a popular student, became class president in her senior year, and permanent class president upon graduation. Here on the left is Perkins as a junior, and on the right, graduating in 1902. During a summer break from college, Fannie read the book written by Jacob Riis in 1890 entitled How the Other Half Lives. Then she took an American economic history class in her final semester at Mount Holyoke, taught by historian Anna Mae Sewell. The course covered the growth of industrialism in England and America. Professor Sewell required her students to visit the mills along the Connecticut River in neighboring Holyoke to observe the working conditions there. Fannie reported being horrified at seeing the children working in the textile mills in Holyoke. Of this experience, Perkins later said, quote, "From the time I was in college, I was horrified at the work that many women and children had to do in factories. There were no effective laws that regulated the number of hours they were permitted to work. There were no provisions which guarded their health, nor adequately looked after their compensation in case of injury. Those things seemed very wrong. I was young and was inspired with the idea of reforming, or at least doing what I could to help change those abuses," end quote. Both the Riis book and Professor Sewell's class had a profound impact on the direction Perkins' career would take her. Next slide, please. Here we have a young woman on the rise in her career, having changed her name to Frances, thinking that that would sound more dignified. Next slide. Witnessing the Triangle Shirtwaist factory fire in 1911, while she was working for the New York Consumers League, was the formative experience of Perkins' life. Her personal and moral commitment to do something about the dangerous and avoidable conditions that resulted in the tragic death of 146 workers, mostly young immigrant women, led her to Albany to work on laws that became models for the nation. Next slide, please. Here is Perkins as a factory investigator for the Citizens Committee, looking into how the fire happened and making sure it wouldn't happen again. She took elected officials with her to see the dangerous conditions, the lack of fire escapes, and the locked exits. She worked with legislators in New York State to craft laws governing the fire safety, building construction, machine guarding, heating, ventilation, and lighting. And she supervised studies of industries, chemicals, metal trades, print shops, textiles, sweatshops, and more. Next slide, please. Perkins spent 18 years in New York State government, working for the governors of New York, first Al Smith and then FDR, who appointed her industrial commissioner. In those roles, Frances was responsible for some of the earliest and best laws to protect workers. She married Paul Wilson in 1913, and following a miscarriage and a near-fatal pregnancy that resulted in a stillbirth, she gave birth to Susanna, her only child, in 2016. Next slide, please. Perkins was a very savvy advisor to FDR. In fact, when FDR asked Perkins to join his presidential cabinet, she said she would accept the job as labor secretary only on the condition that he would let her pursue a broad program of policy initiatives, what she called her list of practical possibilities. She worked on these initiatives throughout FDR's entire 12 years tenure as president. Next slide, please. Perkins took her role as the first woman to serve in a presidential cabinet very seriously, working diligently to secure the policy changes she knew were critical to working people. Next slide. I thought of Perkins when I read President Danielle Holly's Founders Day e-blast to us last week. Holly said in her email, quote, "Mount Holyoke students and alums lead with courage and conviction, advancing science, social progress, and creativity across the globe. They design solutions that change industries, craft policies that protect human rights, and nurture communities grounded in equity and empathy." End quote. I think, and when I read the note, thought that the statement aptly describes the work that Perkins was doing throughout the 19-teens, 1920s, 30s, and early 40s. Next slide, please. Perkins' list of practical possibilities that she presented to FDR in early 1933 is an outline of the New Deal. All of Perkins' aspirations were achieved except universal health insurance. Next slide. Perkins' proudest achievement was the Social Security Act, often called the most important anti-poverty program in U.S. history. It was signed into law on August 14th, 1935. Here, Perkins, obviously the only woman in the room and wearing her trademark tricorn hat, is standing behind FDR along with members of Congress who had just passed the landmark bill creating Social Security and unemployment insurance. Next slide, please. Lots of people deserved credit for birthing Social Security, but notably, it was Perkins' intensive work as chair of the Committee on Economic Security, where experts debated and crafted the act that got the bill across the finishing line. Next slide, please. As Secretary of Labor, Perkins developed policies that became laws, mediated strikes, and served on selection panels for major public works projects. She was also instrumental in starting up the Civilian Conservation Corps, which ran from 1933 to 1942. Some of the accomplishments of this program included putting 250,000 men in jobs at 1,300 camps within 3 months. This is during the Depression, of course, the end of the Depression. Over 3 million young men put to work in projects in every state. They planted 2 billion trees, built 125,000 miles of roads, restored almost 4,000 historic structures, developed 800 state parks, and taught 40,000 people to read. Perkins never retired. After her tenure as labor secretary, she sat on civil service commissions and spoke to young people about careers in public service. She also taught labor history at Cornell and was invited to live at Telluride House as a resident scholar. Next slide, please. The Frances Perkins Center was founded in 2009 by a handful of community members in Mid-Coast, Maine, along with Perkins' grandson, Tomlin Perkins Coggeshall, who was the only child of Perkins' daughter, Susanna. In 2012, the center opened an exhibit space in a downtown retail area not far from the family homestead in a community whose population triples in the summer. This small storefront exhibit space is where I first encountered Frances Perkins' history and accomplishments in full, almost 40 years after graduating from Mount Holyoke. My husband and I were gobsmacked by what we didn't know about Perkins and walked out with a handful of books that we promptly devoured. Next slide, please. Perkins was a self-made, educated woman who never stopped working. A frequent response from visitors to the center's original and quite small exhibit space, as I mentioned, was, why wasn't I taught about her in school? The center's mission and vision grew out of these early discussions from visitors and supporters. Core elements of the vision of the Frances Perkins Center include highlighting Perkins' achievements, philosophy, and policy contributions, and articulating the relevance of Perkins' work to American life today. We educate through audience engagement. Next slide, please. My interest in volunteering with the Frances Perkins Center was especially piqued when I read Kirsten Downey's book in 2015, The Woman Behind the New Deal, the book there on the right in this slide. What an eye-opener it was. While writing her book, Downey examined Tomlin's family archives and memorabilia, as well as those held at Mount Holyoke College and other institutions. Derek Liebart's book, Unlikely Heroes, Franklin Roosevelt, His Four Lieutenants, and the World They Made, is also very compelling, notably for his descriptions on how effectively Perkins collaborated with 3 of her peers in the cabinet to accomplish so many great things. The center's work over the years to promote the legacy of Frances Perkins prompted new interest and new books, including on the left, Becoming Madam Secretary, a work of historic fiction, numerous children's books, and works about some of Perkins' less well-known contributions. Rebecca Benner Graham's book, Dear Miss Perkins, there in the middle of the slide, is an example of another new book about Perkins' efforts to save refugees in World War II. Benner Graham, as you may know, is a Mount Holyoke alum, class of 2015. She was also a summer intern at the Frances Perkins Center while she was at Mount Holyoke and became interested in Frances Perkins while working for the center. Adam Cohen, Yale School of Law professor, said, quote, "If American history textbooks accurately reflected the past, Frances Perkins would be recognized as one of the nation's greatest heroes, as iconic as Benjamin Franklin or Thomas Paine. Like Franklin, Perkins was a brilliant self-creation. There had not been anyone like her before, and there has not been anyone like her since." End quote. Next slide, please. From the center's founding in 2009 until 2020, the family homestead was still owned and lived in by Perkins' grandson, Tomlin. However, every summer, Tomlin and his husband, Christopher Rice, opened the homestead for small public tours run by the Frances Perkins Center to better ground Perkins in the place that most shaped her character and her commitment to better the lives of working people. Her family's homestead was never a grand home. It was a working family farm and a brick-making site. Typically, on the anniversary of the Social Security Act, the Frances Perkins Center would host a garden party on the grounds at the homestead, something Perkins would do each summer she spent in the house as an adult. The center's garden party provided both fun in the form of an anniversary cake for Social Security and educational through substantial talks from notable leaders about Perkins' profound legacy and impact. The center honored these leaders who exemplified Perkins' ideals and principles with its Intelligence and Courage Award, the Steadfast Award, or the Open Door Award. The photo on the left here captures one set of honorees: William Leuchtenberg, notable New Deal and FDR historian; Sarita Gupta, Mount Holyoke class of 1996. At that time, she was leading Jobs with Justice. Now she's at the Ford Foundation. And Ron Phillips of Coastal Enterprises, Inc. Next slide, please. Mount Holyoke alums have been involved with the Frances Perkins Center since its founding. Betty Allen, class of 72, was a founding director and endowed a fund for us to host an intern every summer from Mount Holyoke. We've had 11 such interns since 2014. 3 alums are also current board members. 3 alums have been honored with Frances Perkins Center awards, and over 100 alums are donors. Next slide, please. These photos come from the 2019 garden party at which Maria Mosares was awarded the Perkins Center's Steadfast Award. Many Mount Holyoke's alums attended that year to celebrate Maria. Next slide, please. Now moving on to the homestead itself. In the early 2010s, center staff, volunteers, and experts documented the 57-acre site with its connected house and barn complex. For that peer-reviewed research work, the homestead was designated a National Historic Landmark in 2014. By January 2020, having secured a Save America's Treasures grant of $500,000 from the National Park System and raised over $5 million in grants and donations, the Perkins Center was finally in a position to purchase the homestead property from Tomlin and ensure that we had the funds in hand to complete the extensive preservation and restoration work needed to make the homestead structures and surrounding property safe and accessible to host the public. Working with historic property experts, we sequenced the necessary preservation and restoration work on the buildings and site. Years of deferred or make-do maintenance had to be corrected. A parking lot needed to be built. We had to raise the barn, there on the left, and build a foundation underneath it compatible with a historic structure. The home's basement and supports for the floors above required significant reinforcements, and upgraded systems had to be installed. A roof had to be replaced. A dormer was removed to restore the historic integrity of the structure. Research of historic photos and building remnants in the barn proved that a porch had once been part of the historic structure. This discovery enabled us to replace the porch and add an accessibility lift. The restored barn was outfitted to serve as a multi-purpose space for exhibitions and programs. One of the favorite places for people to visit is the pantry in the house itself, which contains all of this gorgeous blue tableware that is renowned in New England. Next slide, please. The Frances Perkins Homestead finally reopened to the public in August 2023. August of 2023. President Holly, then only 1 month into her tenure as president of the college, and Vice President of Advancement, Cassandra Jolie, attended that celebration in 2023, along with 10 alums. Next slide, please. As the center's work related to Perkins and the homestead received increasing notice, the Biden administration came calling in early 2024, asking whether we might want to be considered for designation as a national monument. In the summer of 2024, the center hosted a meeting for Secretary of the Interior, Deb Haaland, and Assistant Secretary Shannon Estenoz to hear input from community members, including Heather Cox Richardson, who lives here in Maine, and a local high school student whose class had visited the homestead. They, the congressional delegation from Maine, and many others advocated for national monument status. The National Parks Conservation Association and the Frances Perkins Center launched a nationwide lobbying effort. Over 5,000 signatures were submitted. We were designated a national monument on December 16th, 2024, at a signing ceremony at the Frances Perkins Department of Labor in Washington, D.C. Tomlin, Perkins' grandson, is seated in the wheelchair next to President Biden. Sadly, Tomlin died a month later, but was extraordinarily grateful he lived to see this day. Next slide, please. National Park historic sites and monuments are where stories of people are told through places. Such places are where the stories hit the ground. This is Frances Perkins Place. I urge you to visit. It is a terrific and enlightening site. Next slide. Finally, This slide shows the flyer we are including in our year-end fundraising appeal. It depicts the broad impact of the Frances Perkins Center's work over this past year, our first year as a national monument. Even without funding or staffing support from the National Park Service during our inaugural summer season, due to the widespread government cutbacks, the Frances Perkins Center managed to keep the doors open to the public and introduce yet more people to Frances Perkins. Next slide, please. Thank you. And I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you so much, Susan. That was fantastic. If you have a question, feel free to raise your hand and unmute yourself. And happy to, or you can write it in the chat, either way.
And can we stop the screen sharing so we can see
Yes, I will
everybody?
do that right now. Thank you.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
That was just wonderful.
Thank you.
Susan and I were talking while you're thinking of your questions. Excuse me. Susan and I were talking the other night in preparation for this, and I shared my own experience at the Frances Perkins Center. I was lucky enough to go to the house in 2019 when it was still owned by Tomlin and his husband. And they were there on site, and this was before all the renovations. And they would run these little summer tours, just a few people, and you could walk through the house, walk down to the river and see the brickworks. There's a lot of clay in that area, and so there's bricks everywhere. And Tomlin and Christopher could not have been more generous with their time and more welcoming. I mean, to the point where my husband Joel and I were sitting in the living room with Tomlin, and he was telling us his memories of his grandmother, you know, and what she liked to do. And there's her sewing box, and here's the kitchen, and she loved to bake here. And, you know, this was her place that she came back to. It was her respite from the world. And it was just sort of a magical moment. And I think our timing was just wonderful because Tomlin, you know, did not live that much longer. He only lived 5 more years after that. And so I wrote him a note saying, thank you so much for your hospitality. And he wrote me this lovely note back. So he was, you know, it was just very personal and very kind. So that's my own little memory of being there before it got renovated and improved.
Well, and a comment to add to that, Lori, is that Tomlin growing up knew very little about his grandmother because his mother, Susanna, was challenged in many ways. She had this similar illness as her father, and so she did not have a good relationship with Frances, and so didn't talk to her son much about what his grandmother had accomplished. And so it was wonderful that late in life, in his 20s, he discovered who his grandmother was.
Yeah, it was just wonderful. I saw a hand. Yeah, Susan Ennett, can you unmute yourself?
Yes, thank you. That was such an interesting presentation. I have more of a historical question, which is if you could talk a little bit about what relationship Frances Perkins had with Eleanor Roosevelt, 2 gigantic women in history. Were they friends? Did they interact? Did they talk about policies that Frances was so instrumental in bringing about?
Thank you for that question, Susan. Yes, they are not described as friends, but as colleagues. They both had separate agendas. Eleanor's was far more socially oriented, and Frances's was more policy and law oriented. And Eleanor was a far better public communicator. And so they shared values and principles, and worked collaboratively, but did not cross over into each other's circles too much. They both recognized that they were really critical to FDR's success. They reached very different communities.
I will say I found a picture online of Frances Perkins and Eleanor Roosevelt. It's in the archives at Cornell University's Industrial and Labor Relations School. And I grew up in Ithaca, so I know Cornell very well. I actually have a friend who teaches at the ILR school. And they have an archive of photographs, and there's a lovely photograph of Eleanor and Frances laughing about something, looking at each other and laughing about something. I think it must have been, in the 40s. Do you know the one I'm talking about, Susan, that picture?
Yes, it was widely used this season because there was a play here in Portland, Maine, Eleanor, and the ad featured that photograph of Eleanor and Frances laughing together. It was a great photo.
It is a great photo. Andrea, go ahead.
Yeah, Lori, Susan, it's great to see you. Where are her papers?
They're in various places, Andrea. Mount Holyoke has some, Cornell has some, Columbia has a great deal of them, and Columbia has audio tapes as well.
Okay, all right.
Or oral history.
Yeah. I mean, it was a very sad life.
Yes.
So it's just a very fertile area for some. I don't know that there's a recent book by a Mount Holyoke alum, isn't there? On
Yes, yes. Dear Miss
right.
Perkins.
Is there a full biography?
Kirsten Downey's is terrific.
Okay.
The woman behind the New Deal. That is her full life.
Yeah.
There is another biography, and the author's name escapes me. That is perhaps more scholarly. It's a little more difficult read for that reason in some respects. But I think the woman behind the New Deal is extraordinary.
Is the
The
better
other
one.
one I really like is Derek Liebart's Roosevelt and the Four Lieutenants, because it really talks about how effectively 4 members of FDR's cabinet collaborated to achieve so much. And that was,
Right.
It's really quite striking how they worked together to make things happen. And that's one of the things that the center is doing with its public programming, is it's trying to get people to talk together about issues of today, because we solve problems better if we're talking to each other.
Right. Are there internship opportunities? Is there a lot of cross pollination between the center and the college, or no?
Yes, yes.
There is. Okay.
We have an intern every year. We've done a couple of programs with the Weissman Center for Leadership. Yeah.
Okay, that's great.
The college has been very, very good with us.
Can I jump in on that? I had a question about internships. Are they open to just college students and any college? Because as you know, I teach in an all-girls high school, and some of my alums might be really interested in an internship. So what's the criteria for internships?
So we typically always try and have at least one Mount Holyoke student, because we have the endowed funds from Betty Allen. But in recent years, the last 5 years, we've had a second intern. While we tend to favor students who are in Maine, Bates, Colby, Bowdoin, No, we are open to
Yeah.
others, and in fact, our new executive director is considering some high school students as well.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you.
And I see that Nancy has her hand up.
Yeah,
Go
great.
ahead.
Thank you, Susan. And as a fellow economics major, I don't know if you remember that wonderful portrait of Frances Perkins that was in the lounge in Dwight Hall.
Yes.
But I remember studying in that room, which is really where I first became aware of her. I mean, I wonder if you could say a little more about the leadership role that she played trying to rescue refugees and particularly
Yeah.
people who are fleeing the Nazis. I feel like that's a part of her legacy that often doesn't get as much attention as it should.
You're absolutely right, Nancy. And it's fairly recent research into that more deeply. And I do commend Rebecca Benner Graham's book if you're interested in that, because she documents a lot of the letters that Perkins received, and the efforts that she went to. It was an uphill battle the whole way. There were a number of people in the administration who were very much against helping the refugees. So, but she is generally credited with having played a significant part in getting 20 to 30,000 people out of Europe.
Wow.
Yeah, it was, and that part of her legacy was not known for many, many years.
Well, and it would have been so much more if FDR and other people had
Helped.
had helped. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And supported the work, because it was really,
Cool.
at the end, she was doing it sort of under the table.
We can talk because I'm muted.
Stephanie, go ahead.
So one thing you haven't talked about at all is the Frances Perkins Scholars at Mount Holyoke. I don't know if you don't want to include that in the speech at all, but that's, I think, very, very important. And I didn't know if you wanted to comment on that.
Yes. And they've been great friends to the center as well. So thank you for raising that. I think that Frances Perkins Scholars started just shortly before our class.
Right. I actually looked this up. It started in 1980.
So it was after us.
Yeah, it was after us.
Okay. All right. I guess when I was hearing then, as a graduate, that they were starting up the program, it was striking to me that they chose that name. I didn't know that much about Frances Perkins at that point, but it was because it was a program set up originally for. So they're actually, I think, I want to be sure I'm answering your question correctly, Stephanie, because there are Frances Perkins Scholars who are.
I actually know a lot about the program because we do fund it somewhat. And basically, it's women that have had to leave their education and go back.
Yes.
And to finish. And actually, one of our friends' daughters interviews for Truman Scholars. And there was a Frances Perkins Scholar that went on to become a Truman Scholar. So I just think it's a very worthy cause. I think it's really important.
It's a terrific program.
Yeah.
And they've been among our most rabid fans, for sure. Yeah.
So
They set up a fabulous exhibit. We have some wonderful exhibit screens that the Newman's Foundation helped us create that travel. And they invited the program, the setup to the campus, and did a wonderful program for about 2 months there.
So I looked at the program a little bit after we talked, Susan, and did you guys know it is 10% of recent classes are Frances Perkins Scholars, which I had no idea. I mean, that's just much bigger than I thought it was. And I think it's wonderful.
Yeah, it started quite small, but it's wonderful because it serves non-traditional age college students.
I think it's also true that maybe Wellesley has it too, if I remember correctly, but I could be wrong. That's, not just Mount Holyoke, but I think there are other programs that have Frances Perkins Scholars, but I could be wrong about that. I have to research it.
Do they call it Frances Perkins Scholars?
I'm not sure. I have to look into it, but I know that when I talked to people at Mount Holyoke about Frances Perkins Scholars, that's something that I wanted to support because I thought it was so important.
Yes.
Because I was very fortunate not to have to worry about, everything else in life when I was going to school. And I thought who I talked to said something that Wellesley has something similar, but I could be wrong.
I think Smith might as well. I thought Smith had the Ada Comstock Scholars, which are similar as well. So I think it's a couple of places do have a similar program.
Right. I just think it's so important. A lot of people don't have opportunities that I had. And, seeing women going back to school and, taking care of their families, I think it's just wonderful.
Yeah.
Is it a BA degree or is it a Frances Perkins certificate?
No, it's a BA.
It's a full BA. Okay,
Yeah, but
great.
usually they've been in school for a year or so. They've had to drop out because of family situations or economics, and they're going back to school.
Yeah, it was always just considered a non-traditional age. It wasn't
Right.
behavioral
Was the
coming in.
criteria as opposed to, got it. Yeah.
And there's a pretty wide range of students there as well. It's always surprising. There are some that, are just a few years off from traditional age, but there are some that are quite a bit older as well that are
Right.
coming back.
Right. Yeah.
And if you're thinking you heard about it when we were in college, you must have had Marjorie Kaufman, because I think she was busy trying to pull this together for a couple of years before she
Okay.
actually did.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
great. Thanks for filling
Yeah,
in. Beth.
I was a chemistry major, but I took 2 economics classes and they were very good. Yeah.
And she was
Well,
funny. Oh God, she was so funny.
Yeah.
It must have taken a while to pull that program together.
Yeah.
So, they were probably working on it when we were there. I had just was interested in her time in Ithaca, since that's my hometown. It was the last 10 years of her life, I guess.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Well, it's wonderful because we've heard those of us who are associated with the Frances Perkins Center have heard a lot of stories because one of our board directors is Christopher Bryceth, who was living at Telluride House when his cohort of students invited Miss Perkins to be their resident scholar. And so he has.
And this was all male, right?
Yes. And she was evidently, there's a letter from her to a friend about how delighted she was to be invited to live with the boys. She was at that point, 71 or something. And it was after her husband Paul had died in 52. And yes, no, it was a wonderful experience in her life, but the young men who were in Telluride House while she was there continue to dialogue about her today. I mean, it was a profound experience, and they invited other scholars or people that she had worked with in government to speak on campus and would get them going in debates and things around the dinner table. So it was, there are a great many wonderful stories.
Yeah, I think she was there. I think she was first invited to do like a guest lecture thing in 1955 and then went to the campus in 1957 or so and was there until she died in 1965 at the age of 85.
Yeah.
So she kept right on working right up until the end.
She did, yes. Well, she was well, her husband had died by that point, but she was the family's sole support because he lost everything when he became ill.
Yeah, that must have been really hard for her. I mean, she was really the family breadwinner, right?
Absolutely.
And
And
go
she
ahead.
very much protected her private life. So Paul and Susanna did not live in Washington while she served there. She did her best to keep them out of the limelight. Paul was quite ill. He spent a lot of time in institutions. while
Was
she
he
was there.
bipolar?
Yeah, yeah,
And which is also what Susanna was
yes.
bipolar.
And Tomlin was very open about the fact that he had elements of it as well. So it was clearly a family gene.
Yeah. I mean, and one of the things she did was she kept her name, Frances
Yes.
Perkins. She didn't use her married name.
Yeah,
So really she set the model for independence and self-sufficiency and more than self-sufficiency because she supported her family.
yeah. Well, and
I
it was the same way with wanting to be known as secretary as opposed to Mrs. For her at that in that era, the Mrs. label implied that you took care of the home, and that's not what she was doing.
Not by a long shot. She was taking care of our larger home. I think all of us look back on the work she did, trying to get universal health care and getting Social Security and all the things that we are still struggling with. It just, it's sort of shocking how little progress we've made.
Yeah,
But what a visionary.
yeah.
I have something to add to the conversation. I'm racking my brain a little bit, but I think the PBS program American Experience had a show, I think it's 2 hours long, hour and a half. And it was on the factory fire. Is it?
The Triangle Shirtwaist Fire,
Yeah.
yes.
And it concentrated on Frances Perkins heavily. And what was really my memory, what I remember, lots of pictures of her working, like with FDR, and more detail about the deals they would make, what she would compromise on, and other things she made him do these things. And it was a fantastic program. So if you're interested, I'm guessing you can get it off PBS website. I don't know, Susan, you may know the show,
Yeah, no,
the
I
segment.
know, yes, and there may be a link to it on the Frances Perkins Center's
Oh, that could be.
homepage because it's quite well done, yes.
Yeah.
Well, I read the book, Rebecca Brenner Graham's book, and I was very impressed by Frances Perkins's ability to negotiate,
Yeah.
to find the opening and make her way through it, whatever it was. And it might have been very narrow. And she was working with people who were not particularly cooperative and were trying to shut her down. And, her doggedness in doing as much as she could to save people was really very impressive.
Well, and I think it's a testament to the power of knowing when to give and take in a negotiation over complicated needs and get what you can when you can, and then come back and deal with the rest. So that's where I think both Kirsten Downey's and Derek Liebart's books do a really good job of what she accomplished was possible because she knew when to negotiate, when to give, when to stay firm, when to collaborate. And that's those are some of the things that the center tries to promote, that it's, banging your fist on the table is not the way to come up with the right policies.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we're coming up on 8 o'clock. I don't see any more hands. So I just want to thank you, Susan, for just a fabulous presentation. This has been absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much. We could all just do it.
It was a pleasure. Thank you.
And I'm hoping to get over to the Frances Perkins Center soon.
Please, please do. Please do.
Well, thank you all for coming, and
Thank
we'll
you.
see you all soon, I hope.